All right, it's time to get you ready for week 2 of fantasy football in the NFL. This is the Ourlads Football Radio Network. We're going to take a look back at the best and worst of week 1 and much more, including lineups, injury reports, and, of course, take a look at our league, our fantasy league that we are all in, Jamal, Dan, and myself. So that's coming up as the OFN on PSN starts right now. All right, so we are ready to go for week 2. Actually, week 2 is in the books. Week 2 started yesterday in a thrilling game that I know. I don't know, man. Is this the end, Jamal, of Andy Dalton and Marvin Lewis? Officially the end? I mean, it should have been the end last year of Marvin Lewis. And, it happens sometimes when you always go that extra year with a coach when you should have got rid of him, and then you ruin it for like the very next year, and they're one game away, and then it's over. It's done.
Yeah, I mean, 1 year. I think it's probably like 3 or 4 years too long. But yeah, I mean, it was just kind of disgraceful, especially Dalton. I mean, like I said, Marvin Lewis probably is a few years due to have been relieved. Dalton, I mean, I don't know what's happened to him. I know he's not an elite quarterback, but I thought he was better than this. I mean, he looked worse. He was worse than Deshaun Watson by a lot, really.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, something's going on there. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense other than maybe something happened to him last year when the team had the injuries. Maybe his confidence really got shot, even though, of course, he's been a pretty bad playoff quarterback. So his confidence has been lacking for years now. So, yeah, it's a franchise that needs a complete change. They need a new coach, it looks like, and they got to give A.J. McCarron a shot real soon. So let's also bring in Dan Weinrich to the program. And, Dan, hopefully you didn't have to stay up too late to watch that game because I don't think anybody out of Houston and Cincinnati did.
I did stay up and watch it, although I think I did fall asleep for a good chunk of the fourth quarter.
Good for you.
But you wouldn't have known the difference. It was a rather slow-paced, sluggish, ground and pound, good defenses squaring off kind of affair. I just would like to take the other side on this Cincinnati situation. I mean, I'm not really a Bengals apologist, but I do think we might be overreacting. Obviously, we know Houston is an elite defense. Perhaps Baltimore we're going to find out they actually have returned to elite defensive status as well. And I do think there are brighter days for Cincinnati. They do have a lot of troubles on the offensive line, but they have just a lot of talent on offense, and I think that it'll show eventually. They're not going to score 5 points a game. Well, if you average the first 2 games, they're not going to score single digits or 10 points for the rest of the season moving forward. I think Joe Mixon owners, AJ Green owners, don't panic. Andy Dalton owners, hopefully he's not your starter. But hey, look, Marvin Lewis still has a winning record for his career. So, and he's the second longest tenured coach after Belichick. So, I think I think they can expect anywhere between 7 and 9 wins as they do every season. So, see how it turns out.
All right. So, as far as week 1, Jamal, what did you learn the most from week 1? What was the big story for you?
I mean, obviously, week 1 you learn a lot. You learn, you learn what to look for in a lot of areas. The one that really stuck out to me was at this point, stay away from all Indianapolis Colts until Luck returns. So stay away from Gore, stay away from T.Y. Hilton. Hopefully you have guys that, you have a running back who's better than Gore you can start. Wide receiver is probably a little more dicey because T.Y. Hilton was high in most drafts. But until Luck returns, you got to leave him alone.
Okay. And, I mean, you take a look at sometimes, when you have those young quarterbacks, or unfortunately for our sake, being Jet fans, when you have a middle-aged quarterback,
right,
you probably should stay away from skill position players in the first few weeks of the season. Now, I know we talked about the receiver for Cleveland, Coleman, and he played well. He I don't know what's going on with Kenny Britt, Dan, but he didn't play well in the preseason. had another drop last week, key drop. Coleman's outplayed him, so I'm kind of surprised. Something must be going on with Britt. But what about Coleman? I mean, it's Cleveland and Kaiser. You want a few more weeks before you trust him as a starter?
I'm starting him. I started him last week. I'm starting him again this week. I mean, I can't say. Look, when he played last year, until he got hurt, he was producing at a clip worthy of starting week to week, and he definitely. Early indications are that they're going to give Kaiser at least a little bit of leeway to throw the ball, and this is his number one target. So I trust him. As far as Kenny Britt, I think the pendulum is just swinging a little too dramatically. We're all forgetting, last year he was undrafted. He was a real shocker to have a 1,000-yard season for St. Louis. I'm pretty sure back draft time, the only receiver he certainly wasn't being taken. He was like a mid-season, ad. And I don't think anybody was counting on any receivers. I think it was like Quick was like the only guy getting drafted at the beginning of the year. And so, that was his first 1,000-yard season of his career. And he's, I think, 29 or 30. Let's not have too high expectations for Kenny Britt. I think we can expect that he'll do better than he did last week. I think he scored like 1 point in standard scoring, or even in PPR. But he, we shouldn't expect too much from him. And Corey Coleman's definitely the number one option out there.
Well, I think with Britt is that he had such a big time college career, came into Tennessee and was about to explode in his first month, and then he had the injury, and then the injury turned into the suspensions. And then he disappeared. And then he goes basically rummaging around to crappy teams with crappy quarterbacks. And he's not really, and then the Rams, of course, they're pretty bad, as we know. And that's where all the crappy quarterbacks are. And then the breakout season happened. So you did wonder, okay, is he going to now fulfill the potential we saw when he was 4 years younger, when he first came into the league? But yeah, I got to think that when you're going back to dealing with a young rookie quarterback again, and you do have Coleman on the other side, and you're starting to drop balls, which you didn't do before. I don't think you might even at this point in time, if you have Kenny Britt on the roster, would it be a smart idea, Jamal, to cut him for someone else, or would you be a little bit more patient with him?
No, I would cut him. I mean, the track record isn't enough to hold on to him and take a spot from somebody who might be producing already. We'll talk about players to add coming up, but there's a bunch of wide receivers out there, young and, middle-aged, who are doing more than Britt. So there's really no reason, if you have Britt and maybe you had a hunch that he might have a big year. I think that's the type of thing you got to see that week one in order to justify holding on to him and taking up a roster spot.
Okay, last week we had talked about some of the players that were going up against their former teams, and I know one of those players was Eddie Lacy. You had that question, Dan, about those three running backs, Lacy, Gore, and who was the other one? Dan?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm still. You gave me flashbacks to my experience of starting Eddie Lacy last week.
Who was it? Lacy, Gore, and who?
Sorry, Perkins.
Oh, okay. So
none of them were good starts.
No, none of them. Yeah, and Eddie Lacy again. Yeah, Eddie Lacy is most overrated back or it was in football. So even though he's gotten lighter, it doesn't help. And then of course we saw Adrian Peterson go up against his former team, and that was a washout. Even though that was a little bit more predictable too, I guess, because Minnesota's got a really good defense. And New Orleans has three running backs. I was actually surprised Adrian Peterson did start, but that was it. I mean,
did he actually start?
I think so. I saw him right out there. He got maybe one carry, and then he was out there for a couple of plays, and then we didn't see him again for a while.
Right.
Yeah. It was like Peterson for a couple of plays, and they threw in Ingram for a couple of plays, and they threw in Kamara for a couple of plays, and then I just, I got confused.
I mean, his biggest play was that stare down to Peyton on the sideline. That was the biggest play for Peterson all week. So,
And I don't think that's going to change, Dan. I just don't. That's why I had no problem. And I don't know if Peterson was drafted ahead of Ingram. I think he was in our league. I didn't see it that way. I mean, Ingram's going to get more carries than Peterson. He had a good year last year. Peterson's older. They're just not going to just say, okay, you're the Adrian Peterson before. It's not happening that way. And the question is, though, do you think Adrian Peterson stays around in Minnesota now, or are they going to think about maybe letting him go if this continues?
I think it's well, certainly you never know. I mean, Arizona could use a good running back right now.
That's right.
But I think they're going to hold on to him. I think all along the intention. Adrian Peterson may have had the fewest snaps, but he did have the most yards per carry of all three running backs. It wasn't an impressive number. I think it was like 3.2 or something. But they were playing from behind, and I think what we suspected and what has now been substantiated is that when they're playing from behind, he is going to, as far as receiving backs, he's third in the pecking order. When they're ahead, he might be getting the most carries because they probably want to preserve Ingram. But Ingram is definitely their workhorse. And Kamara is their receiving back. And Adrian Peterson is going to be the guy they throw in there when they're trying to train the clock and they're ahead. The question is, how often is it going to be? How often are they going to be ahead with that really porous defense that we saw against the Vikings?
I don't know. I don't think anybody, Jamal, understood why Adrian Peterson went to Minnesota. I don't think anybody did. I mean, to New Orleans. Why would you go to New Orleans? You draft, then you go draft Kamara. You have Ingram. What are you doing with Adrian Peterson in New Orleans? Nobody needs three running backs. Two is fine. We even sometimes go, you just need one. I mean, I don't know what Peyton. This isn't the Patriots. Why do you? I don't know if Peyton wants to be like the Patriots. I don't know. You don't need to have 3 or 4 running backs touching the ball game long, especially when 2 of them are gone. Those are good players, Ingram and Kamara. That's good. It's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw that happen, I thought it was interesting. I thought the style of play might help Peterson. They're a passing team. I thought, both, they could be good for each other. But Peterson needs to get carries.
Yeah.
There's no way you use him as, a spot back, getting, 8 to 10 touches a game. I mean, especially at his age, it's just not going to work. He needs to get into a flow. And, we saw from the first game of the season, if you had to predict something, it doesn't look like it's going to work out.
Now, when was he signed? He was signed before the draft, Peterson? Do you remember?
I don't know. I feel like he was a late signing.
Do you remember, Dan, when he was signed? You can look that up. Because I got to wonder, of course, if he was signed before the draft, then you think, okay, maybe he's going, all right, it's me and Ingram. If it's after the draft, then I don't know what the hell he's doing. Then that decision just makes no sense after he knows that they got Kamara and Ingram. I
think with a guy like Peterson, a guy who's been an alpha dog his whole career, I don't think he has a realistic perspective of the challenges other players at his roster position pose. I don't think he thinks me and Ingram. I think he thinks it's going to be me. And, that's what's sort of sad as players get a little bit older. They have trouble sometimes accepting, a backup position, which is what they become over time. And I think we see that with Jamal Charles out in Denver. And, how funny is it you can own right now you could easily own Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, and Eddie Lacy. A bunch of guys who were going along the top 5 just a couple of years ago. But that's how quick things turn around in fantasy football.
Yeah. We'll see.
And real football, for that matter.
We'll see whether or not he sticks around in Minnesota. Give it a few more weeks, and then we'll know for sure. Meanwhile, let's also take a look at David Johnson. And you mentioned Arizona with the situation with whether or not they're going to go out and get a running back. Now they're bringing Chris Johnson. And, I mean, seriously, when you're thinking about that, Jamal, I'm going, well, he didn't look good in the preseason. He's older. They cut him for a reason. And now they bring him back only because of the fact that they're desperate. So I don't think this is a good sign to me. I mean, if they thought Chris Johnson had anything left in the tank, they wouldn't have cut him.
Right. No, I mean, he's pretty much washed up. I don't think you take a chance on him. You stay away unless he just blows up, week 2 and does something nobody expects. I don't think he's that high on the depth chart, even though they signed him. He's just an insurance policy, I guess. I mean, they're going with either Kerwin Williams or Ellington. I think if you had David Johnson on your fantasy team, and you're trying to replace him. It's not going to be with any guy from Arizona.
No.
You're going to have to look elsewhere. You're going to have to hope for a miracle, hope you pick up somebody on the waiver wire, get lucky, have a high waiver priority number, and you get somebody good, because it's not going to be either Kerwin Williams or Ellington. Those are just spot guys who are going to, have to work together to even produce half of what David Johnson was able to accomplish. So that's one of those situations that, is a no-win situation for the team and for fantasy owners. I mean, if you lose David Johnson, you just got to start over and just, bad luck. Bad luck for us this year.
Yeah, I might actually, maybe it'd be a good idea next week, taking another week into the equation for me to see how my other receivers do, another week or two. And then, I don't know, maybe, I'm looking at whoever's always bet on lefty in our league.
Yeah.
He's the David Johnson guy.
I believe he's our commissioner.
Ah, okay. So our commissioner has Kerwin Williams starting this week. So that's a guy that definitely would want to know, okay, because I've got the extra backs. And he's got some interesting receivers he's got a little bit of depth there. Amendola is on his bench. Baldwin, Pryor, Macklin. So no stars, but maybe a good running back for a good receiver wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, you better hit him up.
Yeah, I will.
I have a feeling, I highly doubt that Kerwin Williams is going to have a huge game. So you might want to hit him up after, Monday, Tuesday, and make an offer.
Yeah, wait for him to feel it first. Then again, they're playing the Colts. So
that's true. So you never know.
You never know.
You never know.
Yeah,
I do think Kerwin Williams is the back to own. Unless you're in a super deep league, then you might want to take a flyer on Andre Ellington, just in case, because he is obviously more seasoned and he's been the lead back, not in the not so distant past. Now, Chris Johnson could end up getting the majority of carries. You never know. It happened, I think, 2 years ago when for the Cardinals, shockingly, but where he jumped in front of Ellington. But I think the thing is, even if Chris Johnson does get carries, you can't expect that he's going to be able to do much with them. He's on the wrong side of 30 for a running back, and he obviously doesn't have the explosiveness he once did. So I don't think he's worth the roster spot. But the other two are definitely worth holding on to, because if you wait and see, they'll be gone.
All right. Allen Robinson's gone from Jacksonville after their big win, so that's a big blow. They had a big win, finally, probably biggest win that team's had in years. And then they lose their number one wideout. So there's definitely nobody else on Jacksonville, though, to get excited about, correct, Dan?
Well, get excited about? No. If you need to replace Robinson and there aren't a lot of options in the waiver wire, definitely Marquise Lee and Alan Hearns are worth a flyer. Even though they're saying they're going to be throwing the ball a lot less, they're going to be behind. They're not always going to be ahead. They'll be behind at some point. They'll have to throw the ball. In football, you can't get away with never throwing the ball. And Marquise Lee and Alan Hearns have both been good in the past, and they're both young. So, they're definitely good flyers. But, you might have to look elsewhere. If
who would you go with if you had to choose? Who would you go with, Lee or Hearns?
I would go with Lee. He's been better more recently.
Okay.
And remember, he was originally a higher draft pick than Allen Robinson.
Okay. All right. So, and who had Allen Robinson in our league? Do we know?
Could have been me. I know I had him in a couple leagues.
Who dropped him?
Where was he drafted, Allen Robinson? Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty high.
He was generally going in anywhere from the late third to early fifth.
Yeah, that's pretty high. Okay.
I mean, that's it's not as big a blow as David Johnson, because obviously
No.
David Johnson's the number one pick
Sure.
in a snake draft. That means the next guy you got after that in a 14 round or 14 team or 12 team league is somewhere in the late 20s. So it really hurts that you now don't have anybody who's a top 25 player on your team.
Yeah.
But you got to hold on to him. And one of my leagues, I could not believe it, Jamal. I don't know if you noticed this. Somebody dropped him. Like you can't drop him because he's supposed to come back this year. He'll be back probably in November. Like, you can't drop your number one draft pick just because he's gonna miss 8 games.
No, I agree. Right, Jamal? You don't drop David Johnson.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not. It depends what the what the exact injury report is saying. I know that they put him on the IR. I'm not sure.
They did,
but yeah, I mean, if they're just saying it's 8 weeks, of course you don't drop him.
Okay. Now, speaking of running backs, and I remember last year was actually, if we're looking at it, I'm glad. I'm real happy that it appears that the NFL is going back to running the ball more. And you know what I also like is we're seeing more 4-3 defenses. So we're going back to 4-3 defenses. We're going back, except for the Jets, of course. But we're the exception for everything. We got old quarterbacks and 3-4 defenses with no pass rushers. So go back to the 4-3s. Go back to running the football. And that also we're seeing that in fantasy. The big moves as far as points for running backs, even just last year with a couple of guys that did well and the difference from one year to the next. So now all of a sudden you got all these rookie running backs coming in. And of course, last week we didn't talk much about it, but Kareem Hunt had probably the best rookie first game performance ever. I don't know who the hell else had a better game than that in his first game. So that is huge. And then you had all the other, a few of the other rookies. We've talked about Tariq Cohen and on Monday's show, a big performance from him. Fournette, Dalvin Cook. So this is good. This is good for the league. And so most of these guys, except for Cohen, were drafted pretty high. Dan.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because just a few years ago, maybe going back 5 or 6 years, running backs were so much more highly valued than wide receivers. I mean, the first two rounds of your draft was just running backs, and then there were some rule changes, and wide receiver scoring kind of exploded, particularly with PPR scoring being implemented in a lot of leagues. And now it seems like it's shifting back a little bit. I mean, certainly, I think there's more scoring still by wide receivers than running backs, but the productive running backs are more scarce, so that makes them worth more. And this new rookie class, I mean, it is astounding. I mean, you have all the guys that were heralded, all for the most part, look pretty good. Fournette, Hunt,
Cook,
McCaffrey, all these guys look pretty good. Dalvin Cook. Then you got all these other guys that weren't even in that elite group who also are looking pretty promising. Chris Carson, Marlon Mack, Alvin Kamara. I mean, these guys, it's real. I think we might look back one day and talk about this draft class and a handful of Hall of Fame running backs in. I mean, it's just really amazing how many guys from one class are looking like, potential starters and potential stars in the NFL.
One of your top rookie sleepers to keep an eye on before the season, Jamal, was Tariq Cohen, and he has the big week. So with Kevin White going down, and he's done. Ship him off. No more. He should just find another profession. And it happens. You have injuries, and it's a tough break for him. Invest the money you got and move on. But you get the situation with the Bears where they don't have any receivers. So, but your top options are pretty much in the backfield now. So there's no reason to think that Cohen's not going to get a whole lot of touches all season.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I mean, he got limited touches in the running game. Got about 6 touches, I think, but did a lot with them. And then he had 8 receptions in the passing game. So, and that was week one when teams start out, when the Bears were, they didn't have that major injury to White. So, I mean, you can only expect that those touches go up, and especially how productive he was. I don't think he's anywhere close to like a 1 week wonder or anything. I think they're going to try to put him to as much use as possible. He's proven that he can play at this level. That was the thing with him coming out of a small school. At North Carolina A&T, MEAC Division 1A. Could he really produce at the NFL level? And he does it as a rookie in his first game. So he's going to get much more opportunities. And I look at him as a top 5 rookie back this year. And there's a lot of good competition, as Dan just mentioned. So he's a guy. Not only is he a guy that obviously was a waiver wire pickup, I think he's a guy you stick in your lineup right away.
Okay. What about the players that you should give up on and not be patient with, Dan? Anybody out there, whether it's definitely you either cut this guy or, I've seen enough, and I'm willing to cut this guy and take my losses, or he definitely can't be a starter for me and he needs to sit on the bench for at least a few games. Dan?
For me, number one is Eddie Lacy. We already talked about him. There were a few guys, in the mid to late rounds at running back that were sort of gambles. Eddie Lacy, LeGarrette Blount, Paul Perkins, Frank Gore, Terrence West. Some of them, like West, are looking like good picks for now. Some of them are a little shaky, like Perkins. And some are looking bad, like Eddie Lacy. You got to he basically looks like the least promising running back out of 4 in Seattle. So you got to cut bait with him. I'm also not, I was really dubious about Rex Burkhead being a sleeper. He got a lot of buzz in the preseason as a sleeper pick. He was an ideal Belichick running back. But, Rex Burkhead's been in the league for a couple of years, and he's just not outstanding at football. He's good, but he's not outstanding. And, James White's getting the most touches. Gillislee's obviously getting the goal line work. It's just hard to see where Rex Burkhead is going to give you any kind of production that you're going to be able to count on him week to week. Well, so unless you have a really deep league, I would utilize that roster spot better. And finally, as far as defenses go, Minnesota, Kansas City, they both underperformed in the first round. I mean, in the first week, and they don't have much better matchups this week with Minnesota being at Pittsburgh and Kansas City hosting Philly, both of whom are obviously potent offenses. So, I mean, don't be afraid to cut bait with a defense just because they're 90% owned, 80% owned. I think from year to year, the defense, we've already talked about this in an earlier pod, the defenses that are the best don't always translate to the best fantasy. They don't always score the same way that, you would see. It doesn't always translate perfectly. So, don't be stubborn. Go with the matchup. You have a chance to get Baltimore, Oakland hosting Jets, Baltimore hosting Cleveland. Do it because those teams are probably good bets to outscore. The vaulted defenses that really have tougher matchups.
Yeah, I mean with Kansas City, they'll get a week at home from me in my league because they're going to be at home. And we know how much better they are at home. That's the good thing. The bad thing is they lose Eric Berry. That's a big blow. That will hurt with turnovers. But yeah, when you take a team like Kansas City, you're taking them for Tyreek Hill, and you would hope to Anthony Thomas, but Tyreek Hill mostly on returns, and the fact that they've historically at home been able to come up with big plays. But yeah, they're not going to get a whole lot of extra time for me after this 1 week. And as far as Rex Burkhead, Jamal, I would be, if he's already on your team, and he may not be, if he's on your team, I'm not sure I'd get rid of him this week because you just don't know with Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick Just because Gillespie had 3 touchdowns last week, we don't know if Rex Burkhead will have 3 this week. You don't know with the Patriots. You never know, and that's kind of why it's very difficult to figure out the Patriots running back situation.
Yeah, you never know with the Patriots. You don't know with the Patriots in week 10. And so you for sure don't know week 2. We really don't know anything week 2. We jump to conclusions and all that, but we got another week or two before things settle down and we have a good sense of what anyone's going to do. So it is wise to be patient, unless there's a guy on the waiver wire that is breaking records or putting up huge numbers and you feel like you have to get him, then fine, make the move and drop a guy like Burkhead. But otherwise, you have to be patient. I dropped Dion Lewis in a couple leagues. He was supposed to be in the running back mix in New England, and off of one game, I might have been jumping the gun, but I felt like I could get rid of him. But part of the reason, you feel like you can get rid of some of these guys is because of the tenuous position they're in on their team. So New England is one of those teams. Like you have 3 or 4 backs, you don't know who's gonna get the carries. You only have limited spots in your roster. You really can't, just take a chance and keep somebody who has that much competition and is not a standout back. You just don't know if they're going to get a chance or not. Another guy like that is the whole situation in Cincinnati, where do you hold on to Jeremy Hill? Probably not. Same with Bernard. Do you hold on to him? You just can't. The only guy you really can hold on to is Mixon, and it's because he's more of an unknown. Because he's a rookie with so much potential. You kind of just hope that he's going to get a chance. But it's a dicey situation with those running back by committee teams.
Yeah, I remember. What was it? The one that used to be the worst was Shanahan with Denver. I remember when he was there, and you could never figure out. Of course, this is post Terrell Davis, but you could never figure out who the heck was going to be the running back, and they always had good running backs, but you could never figure it out. It was frustrating to the point where you were like, forget it. I'm just never drafting running back from that team again because you just can't guess. And I think that's what we're dealing with, what we might deal with the Patriots, but you never know. I mean, and the other thing too is these guys are all products of their system. They're products of Tom Brady. Gillespie be lucky to have 3 rushing touchdowns a year if he's back on Buffalo. So, Bolden shouldn't even be in the league. Okay, he's not a good player. And I don't even know why they keep bringing him back. But probably because he knows the system, he's been around, he can do a few other things. But he's not even a very good player. But he's a Patriot. And they find guys to do limited roles, and especially on that offense with Brady, you can get away with having guys that wouldn't even probably make the Jets roster. I mean, seriously, wouldn't even want Bolden on the Jets. And we're probably one of the worst teams in the league, and he's on the Patriots. So that happens. You got to. These are the things you think about anyway before the draft. I know we're already past free agency mostly for the week, but quickly, Dan, who was the top free agent pickups from this past week in your mind?
Well, I mean, I think for most of us, it was probably Tariq Cohen, Kenny Galladay. Those are the sexy ones. But for me personally, the guys I got the most excited about grabbing were Cooper Kupp out for the Rams. Obviously, the preseason hype there was true. He has a rapport with Jared Goff. He is seems like the kind of guy who can be very productive. And Kenny Galladay seems a little bit more like a big play guy who, he might, maybe he was benefiting from the double coverage that, either Tate or Marvin Jones or both were getting, or, and so that might not be something you can count on. I think he'll have other big games, but I don't know if he'll be as consistent as I think Kupp you can count on for, 5 catches a game. I was really excited about Alvin Kamara getting the most snaps for all the New Orleans running backs. Like I mentioned before, I don't think the game plan is for him to be the lead guy, but he's going to be in the game when they're behind, and their defense stinks, so they're going to be behind a lot. And he looked dynamic in preseason. He didn't really look dynamic against Minnesota, but nobody did for New Orleans. But I definitely think he's got a bright future. And Chris Carson in Seattle. I mean, Rawls might be getting the start this week, but Carson looks impressive, and I don't think any of us have faith in Rawls to stay on the field. So come playoff time, Carson is definitely a guy you might want to be storing because he might be starting for them a little later on in the season.
And Jamal, what about any players that at this point in time could still be available, fringe pickup guys that may not be the top guys that everybody kind of believes, oh, definitely got to take this guy, got to take Cohen, got to take Cup, got to take Galladay, got to take this and that. But how about guys that were like maybe taken, or maybe they're still left that you're like, you know what, I was even thinking about it, but I need to give them a little bit more time, that you think, okay, you're not suggesting they necessarily take them this week off the free agent wire, but keep an eye on them for next week.
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of guys. I'll start with Aguilar, who's probably on those towards the taken category, but not to the extent that Cone and Cup were. I think Aguilar, he had a very good first game. He's been disappointing his first 2 years in Philly, but Wentz is improving. Wentz has the capability of being a big-time quarterback in this league, and it could happen this year. You never know. So, and he got Aguilar got 8 targets last week, had a long touchdown. Also, it could be a fluke, but I think he's a guy you take a chance on. At the tight end position, I think a guy like Jesse James, he's in his second year for Pittsburgh, 6'7", big guy, also got 8 targets from Ben. He might, Roethlisberger might lean on him throughout the season. Like I said, he's a huge target, got a lot of red zone targets last week also. So at tight end, I think he's a guy that I still see out there on the free agent market, and I'm surprised that more people aren't jumping on from the tight end position. I think he's gonna produce a lot of points there. And then a guy like Jared Goff at QB still available in a lot of leagues. I know a lot of people probably thinking, it's just 1 week he threw for 300 yards. I'll wait and see, but you might want to jump on him too. Like I said, the Rams. I said this last week. The Rams have a lot of weapons now that they didn't have last year, and he was a rookie last year. Obviously, only played about 7-8 games, and he was the number 1 overall pick. Don't forget, and I believe that was for a reason. He does have talent. So I think he's going to be a lot better player this year, and he has a lot more weapons to throw to. And Gurley is 100% in the backfield, so that takes a lot of pressure off him. Guys really under the radar, or one guy really under the radar who played yesterday that was interesting to me was Deonta Foreman for Houston, running back out of Texas. He got almost as many carries as Lamar Miller last night, and he didn't really get any the first week. And it's obvious that Houston's trying to get him into the fold. He's more of a rugged, durable running back than Miller is. I could see him taking a lot of Miller's carries, and if Miller gets hurt, which he's been prone to do in his career, Foreman could be a good guy to pick up and stash now for the future.
Yeah, it looked like they were going with Foreman early and Miller late, and it worked out for him. But yeah, Foreman is a very talented back. Hasn't played a whole lot in college. Had one big year last year. As you said, he's a one-trick pony. He's a downhill between the tackles rusher that also needs to stay healthy, though. And I think that's part of the reason we didn't see him out last week. But yeah, he looked real good in the preseason. So and it makes sense. Put him out there with Deshaun Watson. Maybe those two guys are going to be together for a long time. You would hope so if you're a Houston fan. Who do you like this week as a potential top fantasy players, or even guys that are fringe bench guys that you think are going to play better than people think, Dan?
Starting with a guy that is, a big time player, but had a very disappointing week 1. I think Drew Brees and Tom Brady, for that matter, playing opposite each other down in New Orleans, should both be putting up huge numbers. And along with them, all of their supporting cast, Michael Thomas, Brandon Cooks, Rob Gronkowski, all your disappointing players except for maybe Adrian Peterson. I think certainly everybody in the passing game should be putting up big numbers. And as far as fringe guys, also from that game, a guy that I do favor New England, and I did mention that I think that Alvin Kamara is going to be in the game when New Orleans is trailing. I think that in New England we saw that their defense is not going to be shutting down a powerful offense like New Orleans if they couldn't handle Kansas City at home. And I think Kamara could definitely be in double digits this week. So that would be my star breakout and my fringe player that I think will have a solid performance this week.
And you, Jamal, anybody that you think could be fringe player that has a better week than we think?
I mean, they're fringe players. Maybe a guy like, this goes to my theme really for next week. Just, we'll talk about it in a bit. But like a guy like Sam Bradford, who had a big game and not really usually that type of player. I could see that continuing. Guys like Randall Cobb, who had a big week, surprised many people with a big week in week 1. I think that continues in week 2. I think he'll be a big time producer for Green Bay as long as he stays healthy. So I think that will continue. As far as guys with big games, I think what Dan was saying is true. I think we had such a weird first week. There wasn't much offense. I think that'll start to change week 2. So guys who didn't produce that we thought would produce in week 1, I think that will change. Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan face each other. I think both of those guys will have better performances than they had in week 1. I think they'll put up big numbers. Carr against the Jets, that looks like a matchup made in heaven for him. He should have a big performance too. So even more so than the fringe guys, I think the household names will finally show up this week.
All right, sounds good. Any parting shots, Dan?
Well, I just am really curious. We already talked about this New Orleans Patriots game, and I can't wait to see how these running back by committees are going to shake out. Between Gillislee, James White, Deion Lewis, Rex Burkhead up in New England, between Adrian Peterson, Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara down in New Orleans. I think it's really it's like a soap opera, and I don't know if it'll be resolved this week, but I'm definitely tuning in because I got a bunch of those guys on my teams, as I'm sure a lot of you guys do too.
Yeah, and you know what? With as bad as the Patriots defense played last week, if the Saints can't find a way to score touchdowns this week, maybe Lutz becomes a good pickup because we were wondering whether or not they were going to have sufficient options, especially in the red zone. Tight end has been an issue for them. Even though Fleener played pretty well, but he's not that type of Jimmy Graham player anyway. So Brandon Coleman didn't step up, which is no big surprise. So if one game is one thing, a second game where you're not finding a way to close the deal and score touchdowns instead of field goals, Jamal, maybe Lutz is a guy that'll benefit from it.
Yeah, I like that. I think I always like kickers who are on high volume offensive teams that get into the red zone, whether they finish or not. And obviously, if they can't finish off with a touchdown, that's even better for the kicker. So I like that a lot. One of the things I'm looking at this week, just to build off what I was saying as far as Jared Goff is concerned, and also Bradford. You had two, these quarterbacks who had, uncharacteristically very good games in week 1, and I'm interested to see if that will carry over, if they can do that for an extended period of time, even 2 games in a row. So Bradford, Goff, and also Alex Smith, interested in seeing how they perform this week and whether they've really turned a corner or they're just going to go back to who we always thought they were.
All right.
And also, Greg, one last thing I want to throw in. Excited to see the Buccaneers and the Dolphins on the field.
I'm glad you are.
No, I mean, listen, that's the beautiful thing about fantasy. Even when your team stinks, there are players who matter. Not that the Bucs stink. I think the Bucs will be pretty decent. But, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us had Mike Evans in the first round, Jay Ajayi. You're finally going to be able to start your first-round pick. It's exciting. And, the return of Smoking Jay Cutler. What could beat that?
Oh, can't wait for that.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't know if we mentioned it before, but yeah, if we're going to keep on this rookie theme, maybe another rookie to keep an eye on is Chris Godwin. That's a
Right.
guy that if anything happens to Deshaun Jackson, he's been banged up all preseason. And even if he isn't, I mean, just having another option out there, like Kenny Golladay was a third option. So, yeah, this is a very talented receiver who looked pretty good in the preseason, and that should be a very high-scoring Tampa Bay offense.
And I'm
So
also looking at O.J. Howard for Tampa Bay, the tight end out of Alabama.
another rookie, yeah.
Yeah, another rookie. I'm interested to see how they can get him into the offense. I mean, he's just a beast, like a prototypical guy for tight end, size-wise, speed-wise, and, you know, a guy like Jameis who throws the ball over the field and can inspire teammates also. I'm very interested to see how that shakes out. I know they have Brait already there at tight end, but from what I'm hearing, you know, I'm hearing that they're very high on O.J. Howard, so I'm interested to see how they work him into the offense.
And speaking of rotations, the Dolphins receiving rotation: Parker, Landry, Stills, you know, and they got a few other guys. So I know we talked about this last week. Landry's definitely the number one, but everybody's kind of hot on Parker, and Stills is usually good for some big plays every couple of weeks. So. And this is a new quarterback, so we don't know where Cutler's going to go, who is going to be his favorite guy. Could be any of those three guys, and
Right.
I guess we'll get a glimpse of it in the game this week against the Chargers. So, and I'm happy that Keenan Allen survived last week, so he actually made it through a week, and we'll find out. Yeah, we'll find out if he can make it through another week. Okay, sounds good. So that will wrap things up here on Ourlads fantasy coverage every Friday. Don't forget Jamal's with me on Monday on OFN Monday nights to wrap up the weekend in fantasy football. So Dan, appreciate your time. We'll see you next week, and thanks for checking in with us again. And do something about that delay on your phone. It's irritating.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
It's like when you're on TV and you're in two different rooms and one of them's like 5 seconds behind because of some
you know what it is? It's just that I hear you guys so much better when I have it on speaker, and I was just slow and I was just slow shifting back and forth, and I would miss words.
You gotta step your game up, man.
Yeah.
Because
you're not in Jerusalem anymore.
Yeah, no, although I am a little bit jet lagged.
Okay, we'll give you that. Okay, you got it. All right. So, and Jamal, of course, we'll talk to you on Monday.
All right, Jets, baby.
Oh my God, that's right. We'll talk Jet football first. Okay, that'll be painful. For Jamal Murphy, for Dan Weinrich, I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to Ourlads Fantasy right here on the Prime Sports Radio Network.